Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Father Talks podcast. I am your host, Mike D. I am here with the wonderful Miss Nancy Lasseter. Nancy is a
Hey.
hey, Nancy is a novelist and whose work explores the courage it takes to be human, especially when life demands more of us than we ever expected. Nancy, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. I am thrilled to be here.
I am glad to have you.
I've listened to several of your shows, and I just think the whole format and what you're trying to accomplish is really cool,
Thank
and
you.
it's important. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I appreciate that. Like I tell a lot of people that when I was a young dad, there were no resources. And I had to figure everything out on the fly. I didn't have, my uncles were, both Vietnam vets, and they were family guys. There was other things going on. They were in Jersey, I was in Michigan, and it was just up to me to figure it out. And I have unfortunately fallen on my face more times than I care to admit. And I'm as a, father now, grandfather, I am trying to patch some relationships, with my kids and also trying to not leave other young men in the same situation I was in.
Mhm.
So, um, but I've liked
It's
honestly, I want to give you the floor for a minute. And again, like I said earlier, I like to give my guests an opportunity to, talk about what they're doing, talk about who they are, what got you started. So the floor is yours to, tell us
Hit it.
everything you want to tell us.
Okay. Well, and I think that I'll tell you a little bit about me, and then I'll tell you why I'm especially glad to be on your show.
Thank you very much.
Um, Yeah, I am a mother of 2 fabulous, adult daughters.
Okay.
I am a former trial attorney. I am licensed to practice in several states, and was admitted to the United States Supreme Court when I was only 29 years old.
Wow.
But I have not yet ever argued a case, so don't be too impressed. Up at the Supremes. I'm also a novelist and a professional painter, as well. I also am a long distance hiker, and I am halfway through the Camino Santiago, that goes from France all the way to the western tip of Spain. It's a famous medieval religious pilgrimage route.
Okay.
Um, and I have hiked over the Pyrenees from France to Spain alone. I've done the whole trip alone. And I'm now halfway done, and I'm gonna go back later this year and finish it. So, yeah,
Outstanding.
it's a big
Okay.
endeavor, but it's worth
No,
doing.
you see, and that was one of the things when we were talking before. I was telling you that I love North Carolina because you could just always get out and hike. I mean, I love getting out though, just walking around, enjoying nature and whatnot. So now you've given me something to put on my maybe possibly on my bucket list. Depends on how these old man knees hold on.
It's absolutely worth doing, and even if I mean, a lot of people tackle the whole thing and they take the 45 days to do it, and they
Okay.
do about 20 miles a day, which is a lot. It's not just straight, flat country, but it's got lots of elevation and mountains, so 20
Okay.
miles a day is a lot to do, and like I say to people, 20 miles is fine maybe one day, but if you have to do it tomorrow and the next day and the next day for 45 days, you're gonna
Right.
die.
Right. Woo.
Yeah. So
Mm,
I've cut it up. I've cut it
yeah.
up, and I'm halfway done now. Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, not
Yeah.
we don't get out enough to take on adventures like this enough. And as we discussed, getting out and embracing the rest of the world, you know, it makes you a different person. You know, you don't have
Does.
that narrow view. And
You meet people from all over the world
right.
walking that, every language you could imagine, and you share communal dinners oftentimes,
Mm,
and you hear about the reason they're walking, which can be that they've lost a loved one, or they're having a transition in their own lives, and they're trying to figure out what to do with themselves, and
okay.
that contemplative time on the road is really good to have.
Right. That's outstanding. See, that is something I'm definitely I'm gonna consider. Consider. We'll
Just
we'll say.
just look up the Camino. Spain,
Okay.
Spain, the yeah, the French Camino, the Camino Frances across Spain from east to west, and you can see it. It's the most popular of the Camino routes. Yeah,
Really? Okay. Well,
yeah.
that's outstanding. So let's get into this. What's the first? You know what? Actually, let's talk about the book. The Farmer's Son.
Yes. And that's also part of the reason why I'm so glad to be here today. Farmer's Son is the first book, apparently, I'm told everywhere, is the first book that's ever done about the generational shame and cost of having trouble reading, of
Okay.
dyslexia. Um, and some basic statistics here are that 1 in 5 people around the world are dyslexic. It's
Really?
20%.
That's, wow.
It's a wow number, and it's 20% everywhere. So it's not just that English is very hard to read, but Chinese is easier. No, 20% of Chinese have trouble reading. 20% of French people have trouble reading. So it's universal.
Right.
Um, and then on top of that, what tends to happen is that boys or males get diagnosed as dyslexic 6 times more often than females are.
Wow.
That's that's not because there are more boy dyslexics than girl dyslexics. They actually think the prevalence is about the same.
Mhm.
But the reason that the boys get diagnosed and the girls don't is because when the boys are in second or third grade and the real reading is beginning to kick in and they really can't read very well in class, the boys act out
Right.
and the boys get bored and the boys get sent to the principal. And if they're very lucky, they get tested.
Right.
Now, what happens with the girls is if they can't read, they get distracted, they start daydreaming, but they don't act out. They sit quietly and they've just checked out. So they're not going to be sent to the principal with a behavioral problem like the boys are.
Okay.
And that's why the boys get diagnosed and the girls don't.
Wow.
Um, and I have also learned that there is a huge racial component to this as well.
Okay.
So that, um, according to NIH, the National Institute of Health, Black students are diagnosed at half the rate of white students.
Holy shit.
And if we all agree
Yeah.
that African American kids are the same 20%, that the white kids are 20%, girls and boys are 20%, we're looking at an enormous underdiagnosis
Right.
of African American children, boys and African American girls, who are going to sit there very quietly and be completely overlooked. Um, and that what's happening is that the African American boys, if they get bored and they act out and they get sent to the principal, they're much more likely to be seen as a behavioral problem, and they
Right.
don't get tested at all.
Right. Now, do they get misdiagnosed with like ADD, ADHD? You know,
They
is
don't
that
get diagnosed at all.
holy? Okay. Wow.
They get diagnosed as Jimmy is a problem kid.
Right.
Period.
And see,
You know,
and I know that statistically, boys boys generally they get misdiagnosed for behavioral issues just because boys just don't sit still. They want to be doing things, So to hear that, you know, black kids are getting they're not getting diagnosed at all
at all.
is a serious problem.
At all. And what really, really struck me, and I know I had sent you a note
Yeah.
before our show, and I just said, I just found this and I'm shocked and I want to share it. There was a study done only 3 years ago in
Okay.
2023 at NIH, the National Institute of Health, where African American kids in New Orleans
Okay.
in a public charter school who were in kindergarten through 2nd grade. And, you've had kids, you know that 2nd, 3rd grade is when the reading really kicks in,
Yeah.
where you go from picture books to textbooks. And
Right.
that's where that ramped up workload starts showing up, and we really see the dyslexia kind of
Right.
problems. Um, and of these children in kindergarten through 2nd grade in 2 inner city public charter schools in New Orleans, almost half were screened as being, "Maybe this is dyslexia."
Right.
They went through the initial screening from their teachers of the risk factors and what are you seeing, and I can go through some of that with you about what as parents we're looking for.
Yeah.
Um, but the teachers were marking, "Yeah, Nancy looks like this might be an issue," and Mike looks like this might be an issue. But for 49.2% of the kids, the answer was yes. Send them for further testing,
Right.
which is an enormous number, okay?
So why are we seeing that?
And then here's the extra stuff. Once they did the actual hands-on dyslexia testing,
Okay.
they found out that half of that number really were dyslexic. So you're looking at like 25% of these inner city kids in New Orleans, and that was just 3 years ago.
And I can imagine it's gonna get worse before it gets better because without I don't wanna bring up politics, I hate politics. Let's just say that our students are not getting what they need now,
No.
so any additional care, you know, is not gonna be there. And I know with
Well,
my oldest son, um, he has some reading issues and whatnot, but it was more that he just learns differently.
mhm,
So as he got older, the more things that he could interact with his hands and whatnot, picked it up right away. He didn't have to read it. He just needed to see it or interact with it.
mhm.
Did great. But the minute he had to sit down and sit still and have to read through something, all kinds of problems.
Well, and he might fit this category
Right.
exactly. And one of the things, I mean, I was so glad that this was a Father Talks show,
Yeah.
um, because as dads in particular, um, to know, number one, you know, it's a generational thing, so
Okay.
that not everybody has the dyslexia vocabulary, right? So
Right.
that the more the younger fathers can learn that this is really out there. And what I'm reading today is that the reports on the reading gap between white and African American kids that go all the way back to the Civil Rights Act research and the Coleman report from 1966
Okay.
say that the reading gap is existing starting in 3rd grade. And all of the things that folks were observing back in 1966 were really dyslexia indicators,
Oh, okay.
without the word. And what is not happening fast enough yet is for the idea of dyslexia to be entering the African American conversation,
Right.
so that fathers can say, "Hey, my son or my daughter, number one, is quite intelligent.
Right.
Um, Dyslexics are, generally speaking, smarter than the
Mhm.
average bear,
Right.
so that you're dealing with kids who are highly intelligent and therefore highly frustrated that they can't read. So it's really
Right.
hard for them.
Okay.
Um, and dyslexics, like you're talking about with your son, it's
Yeah.
interesting. And it's actually in my book. A lot of dyslexics, and everybody's different, but a lot of dyslexics have that spatial gift,
Uh-huh.
so that they gravitate towards like mechanics and things
Yeah.
because they can see the back of an engine that I can't see unless I go around there and look at it.
Yeah.
But they actually know how to torque the screwdriver in a way that I wouldn't imagine how to do it because they can actually visualize the
Watch it.
engine's backside.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, and
That's
that's
so true for your son. It's
yeah, I am
exactly right.
I'm sitting here thinking about that now. Like, and and again, now I kinda wanna get myself tested because and it's not to be funny, but
Mm,
so I am the resident chef in our house, okay? I
yeah.
cannot follow the directions of a recipe. Cannot.
Mhm.
I read great, believe it or not. I read great, but I don't comprehend things the same way reading them as I do seeing them. So
Or
if I
doing them, I bet.
yeah, yes. So if I watch a
Mhm,
recipe being done, I can repeat that recipe step for step just by seeing it.
mhm.
But if I have to sit down and go, line by line and read it, it won't turn out the same way. So that is very interesting to hear.
Well, and I can't tell you the number of dads and granddads, but
Right.
dads who have said to me, "I didn't know I was dyslexic
Mhm.
until I sat in the doctor's office hearing the diagnosis of my son."
Right.
And when the doctor said, "You have dyslexia because you sing the alphabet when you're trying to figure out how to spell something,
Right.
or you have trouble finding the sounds that match the letters,"
Okay.
that's a can be a dyslexia thing.
Right.
And I have other things as well, but there's a whole chapter in my book where the doctor sits down with the family to diagnose the child, and that's the first time that the father ever puts 2 and 2 together because they didn't have the word for it
Right.
when he
Right.
was a kid. Um, and it's so important for dads, especially given the prevalence of dyslexia for fathers,
Right.
versus moms, diagnosed, and I know so many people. I actually got a phone call from the former governor of New Jersey
Okay.
and the chairman of the 9/11 Commission, Tom Keene, you may remember,
Yeah.
because you're from New Jersey.
Yep.
And he called me on the phone and he said, "Nancy, you wrote my life." And he said that he's dyslexic,
Right.
and he said he didn't know until his son was being diagnosed.
Right.
It happens all the time.
And which is insane because so many of these kids are, they're not being diagnosed and they're being labeled as kids with behavioral issues, and that's not the case. So
The behavioral issue is a symptom, but it's not a cause.
right, right, but
And
kids they're acting out because,
yes,
they're frustrated.
yes. And that means that these kids are not getting the attention in the schools.
Right.
They're not getting the reframing that they really need to say, Joe's problem isn't that he's a behavioral problem, and it's not that he's stupid. I can't tell you the number of dyslexics I've talked to since this
Mhm.
book who have said to me, "All my life I thought I was just stupid,"
Yeah.
when in fact it was the opposite. They're smarter than the average person,
Right.
generally speaking. Um, but these folks have said, "I've lived my whole life not being able to read, and reading is a basic is a basic thing we all ought to be able to do, and if you can't read, you have to be stupid." I mean, the self-esteem problems that these kids don't deserve to have.
Right.
Um, and then later on, of course, if you're dyslexic and you have issues with taking tests, you get extra time and all of that so that the whole college tracking can be different if you're diagnosed and you get your help. And so that's why I was so glad to be on your show because I'm guessing that there are gonna be a whole lot of people in your audience, and
I
particularly, African American dads,
yeah,
um,
I
where
definitely would share that because
dys
that
d dyslexia's just not been in the room for the African American experience, you
right.
know?
And
Um,
this
and
first time
that's what this j
hearing.
I'm sorry?
Didn't know this is the first time, like, I have gotten, this type of information. I'm like, "Really?" I mean, because when you said 1
Really,
in 5, I am
1 in
floored.
5.
I am floored at that.
1 in 5, and this NIH study from the New Orleans school, these
Mhm.
people are experts, and what they said was holy cow, all of these dyslexia screening symptoms, when you look at the reading gap that's been talked about for 66 years, a lot of it is going to be because it's a dyslexic child, and
Right.
that this is being underdiagnosed in the African American community. Um, so, I mean, basically, if you're a white boy, you're
Yeah.
more likely to get diagnosed. If you're a white girl, you're less likely to get diagnosed. And if you're African American, I guess the worst person on the list would be an African American girl who's going to have trouble reading but not act out. And
Right.
then she'll be completely forgotten.
Yeah, I was just about to say,
Um,
no help.
no help. No help. And even the boy is the the little kid, the 7 or 8-year-old African American child is gonna be labeled a behavioral problem and
Right.
maybe not get the help he needs.
Right.
Um, and so that's why when I've talked on a couple of podcasts, it's been educating folks who aren't familiar with dyslexia just to put it in the toolkit to say, "Is it possible that my child who's having a reading problem needs to be tested?" You
Right.
know? And we're the best advocates for our kids in the world. I mean,
That's
nobody like a parent, right?
but then
Um,
but again, so we're having this conversation now, okay? Can you imagine had we have been able to have this conversation 20 years ago?
uh-huh.
You know, the depth, the understanding that we would have now, compared to what we would have had 20 years ago, because now those behavioral issues, and I can tell you, I've been to the school for my son more than a little bit, you know, but hearing this, a lot of his issues may have just simply been a kid who was frustrated and couldn't ex nobody knew what was wrong,
Exactly.
you know? So
Exactly. And we can't ever blame the kid, and I know you're not. I'm
oh,
just
oh,
saying
oh,
from their point of view, they think that the trouble that they're having reading is the trouble everybody else has reading,
right,
and that they just can't get over it somehow. They don't necessarily know that the little girl next to them reads just fine without the challenge that they have.
right,
Um, and so it's really up to us as parents to say, okay, sit down with Mary and say to her, walk me through your experience of trying to read this page right here and just listen.
yeah,
And you may hear, and maybe you say, I tell you what, here's a new kids book, and buy something new maybe that they haven't memorized because
right,
they love reading it with you, and give them a new kids book and say, well, why don't you read it to me and make it easy, but then see whether they can produce the sounds that go with the letters.
right,
um, and in my novel, there's a scene with this expert, and one of the things that he says is that a lot of the time, like if I need to go to the grocery store and I
right,
need to buy milk, I'm going to have the word milk in my head, or I'm going to write a list, right?
right,
A lot of dyslexics put a picture of the grocery store in their head and put a picture of a carton of milk,
oh,
so that it's easy for me when I'm 7 to go from hearing milk in my head to writing MILK on a piece of paper. But if you don't have the word milk in your head
right,
because you've got a carton picture,
right,
first you've got to create the word, then you've got to translate it into written language. So
right,
it's a double step. So if you sit with your kid and say, walk me through your process, and you say that in an age appropriate way, but you're not making assumptions that the way that you read is the way they read.
and
Um,
say
and
that,
start with the
done that,
fundamentals.
right.
Yeah,
And see, and this is an education, and I need to definitely look into this more because that it is insane to think that there are so many kids just simply it's it's dyslexia. You know,
absolutely.
now
Absolutely.
wow. Okay, so I had a question for you.
And I had some signs for the parents if you wanted me to go through it
Yes, and,
about
you
okay.
yeah, so let me get to this real quick. So, in A Farmer's Son, Bobby is labeled defective.
Mhm.
What does his label what does a label like that do to a boy's identity over time?
It's huge. I've talked to grown men, in their 70s
Mhm.
who are absolutely brilliant successes and still think of themselves as stupid.
Really?
They think that they're the dumbest person in the room, when they're actually the smartest person in the room, and you cannot convince them otherwise.
Really?
And it's a shame that they hold that they shouldn't have to. And it's very liberating if there's finally a name for that thing that they've always had. Um, I've seen it help people to have a label and to know that it's not a sign of being defective. It's a sign of a brain that operates differently. That's
Right.
all it is. And our school system, generally speaking, is trying to create good little citizens to do good little jobs in the cogs of things
Right.
so that education wants to make conventional people. Um, Education doesn't want unusual people of any kind. Um, and so it can be really hard to stand out. And a lot of dyslexics certainly don't want to stand out about their reading,
Right.
but they might want to stand out about it their performing arts or their painting or all the famous people in Hollywood who are admitted happy dyslexics. Tom Cruise, Richard Branson, Cher, even Steven Spielberg,
Really?
um, dyslexic. Yep.
Okay. And
Yeah.
see
And
now
they admit to it. So imagine all the people who don't admit
right.
to it, understandably. Yeah.
I know I had a guest on, about a month ago, and she was telling me, she's a behavioral therapist for kids and that, and she was telling me that she believes that ADHD is kind of the next evolution of people because they if you look at all your inventors and all the, these famous people that are doing all the, like, what is his name?
Edison.
Yeah, they say that a lot of these people, they have ADHD and their brains
Hmm.
just work differently, but
Hmm.
they're extremely intelligent people. You know,
Oh, yeah.
so all these great inventions you're seeing, all these new startup companies and whatnot, they're all people with ADHD and ADD. And I
Well,
was, oh, no,
and the most famous of all of those people is Leonardo da Vinci,
yeah,
who invented flying machines. He was a painter, he was an architect,
yes,
and he is a famous ADHD guy.
really,
Da Vinci. Mhm.
that is crazy.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. And I know a terrific young man who has ADHD who yeah, has started companies.
right,
It's an amazing gift. It's a challenge, and it's also a gift. Yeah.
right, yeah, it's challenging. I have ADD. My uncle has ADHD. My son has ADD. So yeah, I understand.
Some of the very best people have ADD and ADHD.
Well, I
Some of the
appreciate.
very best ones. Yep.
Look, I'm gonna make sure I play this for my parents. Like, see, look, I'm not so bad after all. You you guys thought I was just in school acting up, because I didn't have anything to do. No, I was just bored.
No, I had 1,000 things to
Yeah,
do, and this was just one of them.
yes,
You know,
exactly.
I'm wasting time on this one. I've got all these others I need to
I got
do.
tons of
Uh,
other stuff I need to be doing.
yeah,
Yeah, but
I can relate to that. Yep.
so
Yeah.
um, so your story traces multiple generations. How do families, how do family wounds travel forward even when no one talks about them?
Eh, Great question. Um, any secret that causes shame
Hmm.
is going to impact the next generation, even if the next generation doesn't know what it's based in. They're going to feel the vibe. They're going to feel the shame. They're going to feel the dysfunction. The parent who's got this, whatever this may be, and is shamed about it, is himself or herself gonna be irritable, acting out, feeling defective, and until this all gets surfaced and dealt with, it just is a secret, hidden thing that passes from generation to generation, and dyslexia is hereditary.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Well,
So oftentimes when folks get diagnosed, they'll say, "Oh, that explains my grandfather," and
right.
they'll process up the generations as well as down the generations.
Well, I
Yeah.
know this is gonna make me definitely I'm gonna have to call my uncle, and I've got a ton of questions now, because again, I did not know a lot of this stuff, So, and I love it when I get an opportunity to really get educated on things, because and this has been an education so far. So
Well,
I
and,
want as many people as possible.
thank you, and my goal with this novel is, sure, I would love, please, from my lips to God's ears, if Steven Spielberg wanted to option my book, I would be very happy. But my goal is not really money, money. My goal is to mainstream this thing
Yeah,
so that folks who could benefit from it really can get it, you
yeah.
know?
Well,
Um,
and
yeah, and I had an e
I know a lot of guys who have young sons. I really want them to hear this because, you don't know what's gonna happen in the future. And hearing that there's so much misdiagnosis, you don't wanna see another kid get misdiagnosed.
well, exactly, and it costs nothing. In other words, if you go to the school counselor and you
Mhm.
say, "Does it have you can you test my kid? Does my child maybe have dyslexia?"
Yeah,
Or a dyslexia test itself is not that costly.
right,
Um, but once all that counts, all that really matters is to have that tool now to know that it's something to bring up and think about and research, you
right,
know? And once that happens, you can't be stopped for your child.
right, and
Yeah.
so, alright, so there's all this research on these things. How do our public schools how are our public schools not doing more? Because this has got it's news. Everybody knows. So,
Everybody knows.
yeah. So, you said the NIH, done all this research, and the proof is there. Why are our school systems not doing more? Uh,
Stretched resources,
right,
it's really up to us as parents to lead the charge and not shut up.
right,
If that's the right thing to do for our child, you
right.
know?
And maybe,
Um, and if you have to be labeled as difficult, that's a brand of honor, you
right.
know?
I have no problem with
Um
it on behalf of my child. So,
Absolutely, and if the school administration sees you coming and says, "Oh my gosh, here's the difficult redhead coming,"
yeah,
they know they better be on their P's and Q's. That's
yeah,
not a bad thing,
yeah. But
you know?
we want the best for our child, our
We
children.
do.
And the more we find out, like it's like this is just another thing. Like you find out which foods are carry the most sugar. You're not going to allow your kid to keep eating it. You're gonna do whatever you can to protect your child from harm. And this is just another thing that says, hey, you know what? This is something I need to get educated on so I can protect my child and my child's child and whomever is out there. You know,
You're making an investment for the next 60 years of your child's life
there you go.
in
Yeah,
self-esteem, in preserving their future, in how they feel about themselves, their families, and what they do going forward. I
yeah,
mean, I know so many dyslexics who have limited their own futures because they really thought they weren't smart, and that
right.
was not true. Yeah.
And see, and me and my oldest son, we're definitely gonna have a conversation after this because now I want him to get tested. He's, he's a grown man now, but still, because hearing this, this there may be something to this. And, I know that he's always felt, that he wasn't super smart, but he's highly intelligent. I like this is a kid who puts things together without reading the
Yep.
directions.
Yep.
He just knows how things go together, but he was a terrible reader,
Well, and
and
that is the main character in my book. You've described the main character in my book exactly
yeah,
like your son.
yeah,
Same person.
he just,
Same person.
man, I
Yeah.
mean, like
Let me in terms of some of the dyslexia markers
yeah,
for
please,
your audience,
yeah,
if dads are thinking about this and they're trying to apply it to their child, certainly once the child has difficulty reading when they're like 7 or 8, we've now moved into advocate for a test.
right,
But before that, um, a lot of times dyslexics will have delayed speech development. They
okay,
don't talk as quickly. Now, girls talk faster than boys, and the joke is, and that stays true for the rest of our lives, right? Um, but dyslexic children can be slow to add new words to their vocabulary as
yeah,
they're coming up. They may have difficulty with rhyming. They may have difficulty clapping in the beat along with the music.
okay,
They may have trouble reciting the alphabet. They may have a hard time with the sequence of the days of the week. They may have a hard time with numbers sequencing,
okay,
how they go. Difficulty connecting sounds and letters, um, and particularly in the middle, so that the word cat, someone with dyslexia will recognize the C and the T, but the vowel in the middle is a mystery to them. It's
okay,
difficult to find that. And sometimes dyslexic young kids will have difficulty tying their shoelaces. So it's those types of things. Um, yeah, yeah, right? You wouldn't think that was a dyslexia
oh, but that
marker.
literally that this is stressing me out because I'm thinking about
Sorry.
all this. No, no, it's fine, but I'm thinking about it, like, even hearing, people talk about, their kids and certain things that they were when my boys were younger. I'm hearing all this, and these are all things that could have been dyslexia, and I'm like, "What?"
And they might not, but when
Right,
when the child then has reading difficulties, if you as a parent are trying to figure out, is this show pertinent to my child? Did your child have these other things before reading even became an issue?
okay,
And it's not true for all dyslexics, but it can be true. And of course, dyslexia is about words. There's also dyscalculia, so that some kids can do the words, but they can't do numbers because numbers switch back and forth.
right,
Um, and there's also something called dysgraphia, which is really a challenge because a child who has dysgraphia has to learn how to create the letter A every time she wants to write the letter A
really.
all over again.
So they're almost
Um,
like drawing it.
but they're learning, how do I make an A? They don't have
Right,
the mind memory. Um, Now, the good news is that I know a young man who was dyslexic and dyscalculic, if that's the right word,
yeah,
um, who then went to the Royal Academy of Art in London, and now he's a portrait painter.
really,
Um, People are very resourceful, you know? Um, and I'm in awe of folks who maybe they didn't have a name for what was different about them, but
mhm,
then they found a path that works.
right,
Yeah,
yeah, oh, see,
yeah,
and this reminds me, years ago, my daughter, she this guy's he's like a spoken word poet, and the guy's name's, Sully Briggs. He did a poem, on it was called, "Don't Let Exam Grades, uh, Determine Our Fate," something like it was
yeah.
something to that effect, but it talked about how we learn differently, how just because I didn't do well on this test, but I can essentially program a computer with no formal teaching. You know, I don't learn the same well everybody else does, and you're putting me in this category as a failure because I just don't my brain doesn't work like everybody else's. I can't sit in class with everybody else in silence because there's so many things going on in my head. But, I can draw amazing sculptures
Mhm.
and pictures and things like this. And you're basing everything on your predetermined notion of what intelligence is.
Exactly.
So it was yeah, I'm gonna have to find that just so I can air it for people, see if I can incorporate it into our episode somehow. But it's really hey, this makes me kind of rethink my entire life as a parent because
Oops.
yeah,
Sorry.
no, no, hey, no, because there's it makes it lets me see that what doing this show is going to prevent another dad, or, another family member from missing out on signs for their kids.
That's
And
my hope.
yeah,
Yes.
and had I had this education again 20 years ago, maybe my son's life wouldn't have been so difficult going through school. And granted, he didn't fail any classes, but it wouldn't have been such a struggle, at times for him because we would have known what was going on. You know, I mean, what do you do? You know, I don't want this to happen to anybody else. And I can guarantee that nobody would believe that percentage of people that are dyslexic.
Well, and the thing that absolutely true, everything you're saying. The thing that blew me away with this study that we talked about earlier
Yeah.
was that the writers of the study were saying, like it was a light bulb that went on,
Right.
forehead slap, and they're the experts. And they said, in what I'm reading in science speak, right? But it's forehead slapping. And they said, holy cow, all of the behavioral stuff, all the reading gap that we've been talking about for the last 60 years,
Yes.
how much of this is because dyslexia hasn't even walked into the room with African American students?
Right. And
It's not diagnosed at all. It's not
right.
just you
But this is I feel like these misdiagnoses, kids get frustrated and this leads to a whole nother set of issues because you get kids who get frustrated, they leave school, they get into trouble, they end up in the prison system, all because, what, the system has failed them because nobody knew about dyslexia.
Well, and there are studies that indicate that there is a higher percentage of dyslexics in the prison system
Right.
than there is in the general population. And now that we know what we know, that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're talking, it's all a domino effect,
Yes, it is.
because kids don't get help when they need it. We continue to ignore, well, not even so much as ignore, we just don't know what is actually wrong. We're saying it's a behavioral issue when in reality it's a child acting out because they're frustrated because they can't express themselves. They don't know what's wrong. As teachers,
Exactly.
teachers are overwhelmed. They've got 25, 30 kids in a classroom sometimes, and Billy is doing whatever he's doing, distracting the class. So the simplest thing to do is, all right, he's got issues. Let's send him down to the principal's office. And
Right.
when really that's not the issue at all.
Well, and especially, you and I were talking about your grandchildren.
Yeah,
Um, um, especially when folks of an older generation also, whatever color they are,
yeah,
also lack the vocabulary because dyslexia as a thing, well, always existed, but as a diagnosis and something that can be treated. I hate to use that word like it's a
yeah.
disease, but there are approaches that can happen with dyslexia now.
Okay.
None of that existed in the 70s and the
Right.
80s. So that grandparents, for example, who are now called upon to raise their grandkids, need the tool of this because
Mm,
it's not something that we grew up with,
yes,
right?
ma'am.
That we
Right,
knew about. So just educating people generally that, it's like learning computers for boomers, you know? It's like, this is something you need to know about
right,
boomers because you may not it may be relevant to your grandchildren that and you haven't ever thought about it before.
right.
Yeah,
So I want to ask you a question. So you chose to narrate your audiobook. What
I
changed for you
did.
emotionally? You had to speak every time, every line out loud. What made you do it?
I was out of my mind is what made me do it. I'm so glad you asked the question. Here I am thinking it's like a 3-week deal to
Right,
record my book. I'm thinking no problem because I was such an idiot and so ignorant of the process, that ended up actually taking me 2 years.
wow, really?
I recorded this whole book, twice. I recorded the entire thing and then I had to record it again, and recording it the first time for the first year was nothing but learning curve.
Really?
Um, and I had to learn how to do, voiceover. I had to learn how to do character voices without sounding hokey, you know? You know, "You don't want the girl's voice to be like that," you I mean, I have tremendous respect for voiceover artists.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
See, I
Um,
can't even imagine.
Honest to goodness. So I had to learn voiceover. Then I had to learn the software program to actually lay down the tracks. And if there was a chapter with 5 people in it, I had 6 tracks because there's the narration. Um, and she's speaking, comma, she said, that's narration. So I had to record a track for every character, all the way through the chapter and then splice and dice, and then do all the seamlessness of it. And then once I looked up all the audiobook specs and the requirements for ceilings and floors and megahertz and zigahertz and
Yeah.
things I don't even know about. I finally got a sound guy to help me in England who was
Okay.
phenomenal. So he and I have worked on it just to make it accessible on the tech requirements for a year.
Okay.
And so and the impetus for the audiobook though, and I'm glad you brought it up, is that audiobooks are always a great idea for everything but in this particular case, it's really important
Right.
because there really are dyslexics out there who cannot navigate the written word.
Right.
And I have had people in the dyslexic community ask me to do this so that they too can benefit from this story about them without it being on the printed page.
Right.
Um, but the thing about the book, um, is that the way it's formatted, the actual printed book, the way that it's formatted, um, is with wide margins and wide white between the lines for
Mm,
people who take their fingers across the page, like that.
that's neat.
Um, but yet it doesn't look unusual.
Okay.
And I had a dyslexia expert that I met with. He told me, make the story as cinematic as possible.
Okay.
So it reads almost like a play.
Oh,
He said, "Don't do a lot of interior stuff. Have it very dialogue heavy so that people are looking at dialogue and turning pages.
okay.
Make the chapter short so that the experience is of going through a book at a really good pace." And I've
Okay.
had dyslexic students. One high school in Indiana assigned the book to all of their rising seniors to read in the summer
Wow.
between junior and senior year,
How
and
amazing
they
is
asked
that?
me to come and visit the school, and I had one boy stand up and say he'd never read a book all the way through in his life, and he
Really?
read this one, and it
Oh,
just changed his life. Yeah,
oh, that is
yeah.
amazing.
And so the audiobook is for those who could really benefit from having it in their ears, rather than in a book form. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I'm definitely I would be your audiobook guy, and it's primarily because it allow it allows me to visualize more. what's going on, you know? Like, even the slightest noise when I'm sitting down trying to read a book,
Is
any out
distracting
it's
you.
so distracting. So, by
Mhm.
putting on my headphones and being able to hear what's being said, I'm not distracted by other things. And, I mean, I could lay on my office floor, you know, and listen to a book, and I won't even
That's
fall
great.
asleep, you know?
That's great.
Just so
Or if you're out walking or something, it gives your mind someplace to go.
Yeah,
Yes.
even on long drives, I love audiobooks. In fact, I listen to, The Fountainhead. Now, that book is something like 1,700 pages long. There is no way in this God's green earth I would have ever read that book. If not for the audio, I would have never finished that book. I'd have made
I know that book. I agree with you.
first 2 chapters. Hell no, that's giving me way too much credit. I would have made the first chapter, and that would have been it. There's no way. So, but, I can definitely say that the audiobook is an outstanding idea. So glad that you did it because it's for somebody like me, without sounding harsh, I would have never read it if I hadn't seen that it was in an audiobook, just because I just don't have the I'm too easily distracted. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I understand. I understand completely.
So,
So, this format will be helpful, hopefully, to
yeah,
to those that
yeah,
wanna
and I
listen
wanna
to it.
make
Yeah.
sure that, when I start posting about it, that I try to, I'm gonna I'll message you later and get the links for it and everything, just so I
Yes.
can include it in, like, posts and things like that. So this way, if people want the audio version, you know, I think I can say that a lot of men will. A lot of guys that I do talk to, they will want the audio version. I know it. So, I am, extremely happy that, that you did that, and
That's
kudos
great.
to you for doing the narrating 'cause, you're a
2
much
years,
yeah,
man.
you are a much better person than me. Yeah, and, you said you thought it was gonna take 3 months. I was like, "Oh, boy, it probably took, 6 months." 2 years?
2 years.
That is insane.
2
So,
years. Yeah.
common question. So, if a father listening to this conversation and recognize his own childhood in Bobby's story, what's the first repair step he can take?
Repair for himself.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
clarifying
Oh,
because then there may be repair for the children, making sure the children are diagnosed
okay.
and taken care of.
Okay.
I'm
Got it.
talking about the work this guy, he deserves to know that he's not stupid. He
Right.
deserves to know that he's probably smarter than the guy sitting next to him, that his brain works differently but beautifully, and that he's been given gifts that folks without his challenge don't have.
Right.
Um, so there's a lot of forgiveness and awareness and education and being open to the education, to say,
Right.
maybe I am dyslexic, maybe
Right.
there is something, and to be open to it. And you had that wonderful, I think your last show, you were touching on, folks sort of in denial about their situations for a while.
Yeah.
Um, and that it can be difficult to go, gosh, I'm dyslexic and I'm going to be dyslexic the rest of my life
Right.
because this might get better, but it never goes away.
Right.
Um, so there's a lot of acceptance of the situation, which takes some time. And so that's the work. And when you talk about repair, it's repairing what this, usually a man, has felt about himself
Yeah.
for all of his life. Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Be kind to yourself.
Right. And, hearing that, I think that will resonate with more men, knowing that it's okay. And again, this is another reason for the show is making a safe place for fathers, their sons, and it's not a knock against young ladies, but it's I want it to be a place where we can listen to an episode, identify with it, and not feel bad.
Right.
Know that, hey, okay, so for this particular episode, I want somebody to say, hey, I think I might be dyslexic, but you know what? I'm not broken. I am.
No.
There's nothing wrong with me. You know, So all these years, I've been thinking that I'm dumb. I'm thinking that, I'm not as smart as everybody else. I want people to come away from this and say, hey, There's nothing. I'm all right. This there's 1 in 5. There's 1 in 5 freaking people with dyslexia.
A- and living my life thinking I'm stupid, look at what I've achieved
Yes,
anyway.
yes,
So imagine once that veil is pulled away, where it's not that I'm stupid anymore, I'm dyslexic.
yeah,
Then you can be supercharged about going forward with more achievements in your life. Because
right,
look at what you've already done thinking you're stupid.
right. And I think again, it will be the realization for people that it's like somebody you need to hear from somebody else that all these years, you know what? You haven't been doing anything wrong. There was nothing you
Nothing.
did that caused this. There was nothing that you could have done to have, you know, prevented it. But know that, hey, it's going to be all right from this point on because now you have an understanding of why, you've been this way or why, things didn't click for you the same way it did for other people. Your struggle was really wasn't well, I won't say normal. It was just misunderstood.
Well, and you make a really good point. Um, this is something that folks are born with.
Right.
You can't choose to have it. It's not that you smoked pot at some point and you got it.
Right.
It's nothing that you have done wrong. You were
Right.
born with this, you're living with it, you're going to achieve with it, but it's not your fault that you have it.
Right.
And a lot of people will say, "What's wrong with me? What did I do wrong?" And there are parents, who say, "My God, did I give this to my child in the DNA?" And the answer to those dads and moms is, if you did, that's okay too,
Right.
because it's okay for the that's why the parents and the grandparents need need to be okay with the idea that they're dyslexic, because only if they're okay with it can they model for their kids and their
Mm.
grandkids that it's okay for them to be okay with it.
Right. That is outstanding.
We're
Man,
always modeling.
yeah. Hey, listen, we have got to stay in touch. I would like to do a follow-up episode because one, I really want to talk to some other people about this. And honestly, I wanna have my son tested. And once I have him tested, I'd like to follow up with you just so you know what we can have a conversation about that. Because again, this has been an education, and
Wonderful.
I thank you so much for that. Um, and no harm, no foul. Took us a little while to get together, but it worked out perfect, you know. Um, and again, like I said, we have to do it again sometime. I mean, I wholeheartedly mean that because some there are just some conversations that flow naturally, and I think this went really well. And again, people, all we can do is learn more. We can't go backwards now and learn less now that it's out there. So again, I'll follow up with you. Actually, I'm going to email you after this because I got some more questions for you, and I want to get your contact information. So
Wonderful. I'm delighted. I'm so
yeah,
glad we spent the
yeah,
time.
yes, so am I. So Miss Nancy Lasseter, thank you very much for coming on the show. It has been a privilege and an education. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to talking to you again sometime soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care of yourself.